Thank you to Kevin for having me here. Thanks to the Heritage Foundation. You know, I have to say, it was the Heritage Foundation that 23 summers ago helped spark my interest in conservative policy. I was an intern at the Heritage Foundation in the summer of 2000. How about that? What a time to be alive that was, the summer of 2000. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but I tell you what, I remember telling my parents, this was one of the first summers that I had worked away from home. I was a college sophomore at the time. And so I was away for the summer here, and I remember they'd ask me about my experience, what was it like, and who did you meet? And I told them, I said, it was just like being with family. If your family are made up of policy nerds who have Newt Gingrich over for breakfast on a regular basis. But it was great. It was great, and it's great to be here now. I'll try to be on my best behavior at this family gathering, so to speak. I can be controversial. The last time I was at Heritage, just a few weeks ago, a protester stormed the stage. Who knows what might happen today? I guess every family has its crazy aunt or uncle, right? And these days, that might be the same person. So, who knows? It's Joe Biden's America. I mean, you know, what might happen? Yeah, some of you are just getting that. It'll come to you later. The truth is that in all seriousness, nobody has done more for 50 years now than the Heritage Foundation in setting the agenda of the conservative movement, in pushing forward the ideas of the conservative movement, and standing in the gap when we needed people to stand. And at this time of challenge, and at this time for choosing, it is again the Heritage Foundation that is at the forefront of the fight. It has never been more important. And I say choosing deliberately, because that's where we are. It is a time for us as conservatives to choose what it is that we're going to be about. It is my conviction that we stand at one of the great crossroads in American history. The decisions that we make in the next 5 to 10 years will determine the trajectory of this country for the next 50 to 100. That is the burden of our moment in history. It is also the opportunity of our moment in history. And the question is, what will conservatives do? What will we do in this hour? Will we have what it takes? Will we take the stand that we must in order to save this nation? Because that's what's on the line. It's the character of the nation. It's the soul of the nation. It's the future of our nation that we are fighting for. We face a rising adversary in China. Rich Colby mentioned it just a moment ago. We face the loss of industry here at home, the unraveling of our social fabric all around us. Pick any measure you want. Birth rates, marriage rates, family formation, all falling. But above all of the challenges that we face, I think the one that may be the most pressing, the most dangerous, is the challenge of the new radical left and the new brand of Marxism that they have embraced. This is a left that now seeks to fundamentally transform American life, that seeks to change and overthrow practically every institution that we value. Marriage, the family, the very idea of gender. They want to purge Christianity and any kind of Bible influence from our culture. This is the great awakening that the left has gone through, the great awakening that they want to force on this nation. And my contention to you today is that the Republican Party, as we have known it for the last 30 years, is not prepared to face this challenge. The Republican Party, as we know it, must be reformed. And the question is, will we as conservatives do what we must to see the party reformed, to see it stand up to meet the challenges of this hour? You know, this was what President Reagan faced. He had to transform the Republican Party in order to meet the challenges of that day. This is the challenge that is before us now. Now, you might ask, well, what needs to be changed? Well, how long do you have? No, I'm just kidding. Let me, in a slightly more serious vein, let me tell you a story that I think will get at that question. The story has two parts. Here's part one. In the 1990s, when I was still a teenager, the world changed decisively. and so did the Republican Party. Republican leaders in those years embraced what you might call a politics of New World Order, and this change was not for the better. The 1990s, Soviet Union collapsed. You remember, the United States prevailed in our long Cold War. Everywhere freedom appeared to be on the march and authoritarianism in retreat. And a good part of the American intelligentsia in this period decided that that was the natural order of things, that this was nature taking its course, that this was history with a capital H on the move, that this was the end of history. Our victory in the Cold War wasn't so much a product of careful strategy and a perseverance or the courage of people like President Reagan. No, it was actually it was the natural order, right? This was just history evolving, progressing towards its natural conclusion. And that natural conclusion, according to many of these people, the so-called end of history, was not the victory of the United States per se. It wasn't the victory of the nation state. No, it was the victory of something different. It was the victory of a global market, the victory of the unifying forces of globalism. If you read the end of history theorists, what you will find is the conviction that a globalized world, and above all, a globalized economy, was the wave of the future. That the world was destined to become one great unified economic empire. Now, this had some appeal on the right, because after all, conservatives had for years rightly defended the free market over against Soviet-style central planning. So if you want to talk about the free market, well, that's something that we were for, absolutely, but the kind of unified, globalized economy that the end of history people foresaw was very different than the free market economies of nation states that conservatives have championed for decades. No, the end of history types, they wanted to break down the borders between nations. They wanted to capitalize on the free flow of goods. They wanted a new world order. That's what George Bush Sr. called it. You might remember. It was 1991, I think. He gave a speech in which he talked about open borders, open trade, and open minds. That was his troika. Open borders, open trade, open minds. And that New World Order required a revolution in American policy. It meant major changes to our trade policy. It meant major changes to our monetary policy. And that's exactly what we got over the next 25, 30 years. It started with NAFTA, and then GATT, and then the WTO, and then most favored nation status for China. What did it mean? It meant no more protection for American manufacturing. It meant no more fostering of American industry. No, the priority now would be the free movement of capital. It would be globalism. The New World Order also meant major changes to our foreign policy. An economic empire required a military force to defend it. And these proponents of New World Order wanted America to furnish that military force. The New World Order Republicans wanted America to be a global hegemon. They wanted us to be the global hegemon. And so they gave us a massive and permanent presence in the Middle East, later 2 20-year-long Mideast wars. They committed America to a forever presence in Europe, not just a presence, but a forever giant footprint on the European continent that couldn't be questioned, couldn't be changed, couldn't be adjusted in any way. And they gave us decades of constant conflict. Constant conflict. Look at the last 30-some years. Constant conflict on almost every continent on the globe, where America was constantly called in to use forces, to expend our capital, to spend our lives. I just suggest to you this: 30 years into this experiment of New World Order politics, the verdict is in. The politics of New World Order have failed. They have failed our people. They have failed our party. The pursuit of economic globalism has failed. The pursuit of liberal empire has failed. It has cost us shocking sums of money. I think Senator Scott was maybe just talking about some of that. It has fueled the rise of our most serious adversary, China. We will surely look back at the decision to create the World Trade Organization in its current structure and to admit China to the WTO, and then to give China permanent most favored nation status as one of the most colossal errors any global power has made in its history. And certainly it's one of the biggest errors the United States has ever made. What did that do? Well, it fueled the rise of China. China has built its military on the backs of our middle class. China has systematically cheated on trade, systematically cheated and manipulated its own monetary policy, and the policies that our governing class adopted in the 1990s and early 2000s helped them do it. But worse than all of that, the New World Order politics has cost us a way of life, and that's the working class way of life. The economic policies of the last 30 years have sent millions of jobs overseas, and they tend to come from one part of the country. They come from the blue-collar worker part of our country. It is the working class, the middle class of this nation that have paid in jobs lost, in wages lost, in families lost, because of the politics of the last 30 years. What has that meant practically? Well, it's meant that whole towns and communities have disappeared. Listen, I know, I came from one of them. I'm from a small town in west central Missouri. I watched, as I grew up, local industry leave. I watched jobs be lost. I lost folks who work nearby at a manufacturing plant, who work nearby on the assembly line, lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods, lose the ability to support their families. That's happened all across our country, not just in Missouri, not just in Michigan, not just in places that begin with M, but all across the United States of America. And that brings me to the second part of my story, the growing threat from within, the Great Awakening. The Soviet Union lost the Cold War. Thank the Lord. But Karl Marx lived on. He lived on in the English departments in American universities. He lived on in the law schools of American faculty rooms. And in places like that, a new Marxist ideology took root that trashed American society as fundamentally oppressive, systemically racist. You've heard this. It's all over the news now. It is the fashion of the Democrat Party. This new ideology began in American academia, but soon, over the course of years, spread everywhere. And I do mean everywhere, like a disease. First, the student radicals in the late 1960s, then faculty members, governance organizations. Now it's infected our businesses, our self-proclaimed elite class, our media, certainly. Now, this virus found a welcome audience in those places because they revised Marx to suit their own ends. You don't hear a lot about fighting economic oppression from these people. No. This is about a cultural revolution. That's what the new Marxists are interested in, fundamentally transforming American culture. They decided that Marx was, only half right. Economics isn't destiny, they decided. No, actually, culture is destiny. That's what the new Marxists say. And they don't like American culture. They don't like our history, which they say is systemically racist. They don't like our institutions, which they say are too tethered to Christianity. They don't like the family. They don't like gender. They want to fundamentally transform this nation. The cultural Marxists are now in power. I don't have to tell you that. All you have to do is turn on your TV. All you have to do is cross the bridge into Washington, D.C. You'll see it everywhere. They run the Democrat Party. They run the Biden administration. Have you been watching who Joe Biden has nominated to be judges in this country? I mean, I sit on the Judiciary Committee. I have to tell you, judge after judge after judge. These are people nominated for lifetime appointments. Ask them what they think about this country. Look at what they have said about who we are, that our criminal justice system is corrupt to its foundations, that we are riddled through with racism as a nation, that we should apologize for our past and our character. It is the reigning ideology. This is the new Marxism. It is the reigning ideology of this administration. And it is the greatest threat, I believe, to this country in any of our lifetimes. It is the greatest threat in any of our lifetimes. And here is my central contention to you today. The Republican Party is not well prepared at this moment to meet it. We are not in position to meet it. And I just contend to you, in some ways, the Republican Party of the last 30 years has been part of the problem. The Republican Party, for decades now, has, in its policies, has helped to undermine the very people who I contend to you are the most important bulwark against cultural Marxism today. And I'm talking about working Americans, working class Americans, middle class Americans. Ours has been, in this nation, a working class nation, a working class culture. What do I mean by that? It has been the working people of this country who have formed our country's character from day one. Historians have marveled at this for literally centuries. Tocqueville wrote about it. This is a nation that has never been driven by the people at the very top. Never. The left says that now. That's part of their propaganda campaign. That's not true. It has always been driven. Our most fundamental convictions have been shaped. The life of our nation has been pushed forward by who? By the working people, middle class people of this country. By farmers, by pioneers, by builders, small business owners. That is who has shaped the American character. That is who has shaped the United States as we know it. And working class, middle class institutions have defined American life. The family, neighborhood, church, country. These have been the bedrock institutions that unite us as a country because they've been at the center of our culture, and they are now exactly the institutions that the radical left has under full assault. They are exactly the institutions preserving exactly the values that today's Marxists want to sweep away as obstacles to progress. And the problem is, Republicans have not been defending them. The Republican Party's embrace 30 years ago of this New World Order politics, this globalism, decimated working class jobs and families. It helped undermine working class culture. After we let China into the WTO, our trade deficit exploded. Over 3 million jobs vanished. Not jobs from Wall Street, jobs from Main Street, working class, blue collar jobs. Listen, you know this. A job means independence. A job means being able to speak your mind. A job means being able to support your family. Republicans help take that from working people. This is the Republican policies anyway. This is the difference. For years now, the HR managers at our biggest firms have forced those who want to work in the multinational corporations to toe the party line, to go to the DEI trainings. Working people, so long as they were essential, so long as we needed them on the farm, needed them on the factory line, needed them performing essential tasks, they had some independence. They had a bulwark of strength. But when they're no longer needed, when the corporations can outsource those jobs to China, when they can replace American workers with slave labor elsewhere in the world, guess what? That working class bulwark disappears. That working class culture begins to fade. And now, without the fear of economic disruption they once had, today's new Marxists are bullying, or trying to, blue-collar workers and blue-collar communities into submission. The only way to turn back the left's culture war, the only way, is to strengthen working people and the middle-class consensus, the middle-class culture of this nation. That is my only contention to you today. We as a party, those of us who care about the future of the Republican Party, must move it immediately to higher ground. It will not be enough to decry the woke corporations. It won't be enough. It will not be enough to complain about DEI training. We should do that, but that will not suffice. If we are going to resist and turn back the left's culture war, we have to create a bulwark against the left's radicalism, and that will come in the center of our country in the great American middle class. If we are going to be the party that saves this nation from the new Marxism, we must fight for the working class in this country. That is my contention to you. If we lose them, we will lose this country. If we lose the middle class, if that culture is destroyed finally, we will lose American culture and American society as we know it. So what are we going to do? The whole of our policy, the whole of it, ought to be oriented right now at home and abroad toward protecting the family, protecting our neighborhoods, protecting our churches, strengthening our country. This has to be our overriding singular focus and priority. What does that mean abroad? Well, it means an end to liberal imperialism abroad. Listen, we face in China an adversary the likes of which we have not seen in any of our lifetimes. The Soviet Union was a powerful, determined, rapacious adversary. But China has more economic capability than the Soviet Union could ever hope for. China has the ability to be a truly peer competitor to the United States in a way we simply haven't seen for over a century now. That means that when it comes to our interests abroad, we have got to rigorously focus on countering China, our biggest threat, and do less elsewhere around the globe. We cannot be the world's policeman. We should not try to be. We do not have to be a global hegemon, but we do have to defend American interests and American security. And right now, China is the #1 threat. At home, it means a rigorous focus on bringing back industry, bringing back blue-collar jobs, jobs that can support a family, curbing the power of the big multinational corporations that want to squelch competition, that want to dominate our markets. Let's strip China of normal trade relations. Why not? They shouldn't have it. Let's take it from them. Let's require our most critical goods be produced in this country. Let's balance our trade. There's the trade deficit nobody wants to talk about in Washington, I can tell you. Actually, they don't want to talk about any trade deficits or any deficits at all. It's spin to oblivion. But I tell you what, the trade deficit is a critical one because it represents not only the overdraw on our accounts, it represents all of the money we are giving away to other countries, in this case, China above all. Let's balance it. Let's balance our trade. Let's strengthen Buy America. Let's break the backs of the big monopolies in this country that want to play by a different set of rules, that want to crush the little guy, that want to have no competition, yet want to get all of these government handouts. Let's put an end to that. Let's restore the economic and cultural power of the working people of this nation. That's how we're going to save our culture, if we will do it. That is the path. I just say this. Today we sit here and we may feel outnumbered, maybe outmaneuvered, but the heroes are still out there. In the heartland, in our factories, in our churches, keeping America alive. The good people of this nation are ready to fight for this nation. They are ready to rise up and defend this nation. They need help from conservatives in order to do so. This is the great challenge of our hour. I believe that we can do it, and I believe that the Heritage Foundation will, as you have for the last 50 years, lead the way to the next 50. And we'll look back, I hope, decades from now and say, in that critical time, at that critical hour, we rose up, we stood firm, we saved our country. God bless you. Thank you so much for having me.